There is a small hammer, and almost nobody who admires this cigar has ever seen it. It isn't grand, it isn't beautiful, it's the kind of tool you'd find forgotten in a drawer, worth almost nothing to anyone who didn't know its story. And yet, if you follow the history of one of the most respected cigars in the world all the way back to its beginning, past the awards, past the collectors, past the numbered bands that people scan to prove they're real, you arrive at that hammer, a gift from one friend to another, a man with nothing, told simply to put it to good use. That man was José Orlando Padrón, and this is the story of how he turned hunger into one of the most trusted names in the entire world of premium cigars. To understand it, you have to understand what he lost first, because the Padrón name did not begin in a factory or a boardroom or a marketing meeting. It began generations earlier, when his ancestors left the Canary Islands and sailed to Cuba, drawn by the one thing that island did better than anywhere on earth: tobacco. They worked the land in Pinar del Rio, the western province that Cuba itself considered sacred ground for leaf, and over decades of patience, they did what immigrants dream of doing. They saved, and they bought, and they built. A family that arrived with nothing became a family that owned the soil itself. And then, in a single stroke of history, it was all taken away. When the revolution came to Cuba, the private farms were nationalized. The factories, the fields, the generations of accumulated work, absorbed by the state. For the Padrón family, it wasn't just property that vanished. It was identity. The thing they knew how to do, the thing they had done for 100 years, was suddenly no longer theirs to do.
And so José Orlando, a man in his mid-30s, did what more than 1 million Cubans did in those years. He left. He arrived in Miami with essentially nothing. No land, no factory, no fortune. He survived on a refugee stipend of $60 a month, in a city crowded with other exiles, all trying to begin again in a language and a country that were not their own. Picture it for a moment. A man who had come from a family that owned the finest tobacco land in Cuba, now counting out $60, trying to make it last. That is the distance he had fallen. And then came the hammer. A friend at the Cuban refugee office, a man named Raúl Fernández, asked José a simple question. Did he have any experience with carpentry? José said yes. And Raúl handed him a small hammer, el martillito, and told him to put it to good use. It's such a small moment. A tool passed from one hand to another, but everything that follows grows from it. Because José did not treat that hammer as charity, he treated it as a beginning. He mowed lawns during the day and did carpentry at night, working 18-hour days, saving every dollar he could. Not spending, saving. Watching the total climb slowly, patiently, the way his ancestors had once saved to buy their first field. And when he had gathered around $600, he did not buy comfort. He bought a future. In September of 1964, on West Flagler Street, in the heart of Miami's Little Havana, José Orlando Padrón opened the doors of his own cigar company. The first electric bill was $50. He had one roller. Together they made about 200 cigars a day. And here's the detail that tells you everything about the man. He wasn't trying to invent something new. He was trying to bring something back.
All around him were exiles like himself, men who had left Cuba but carried the memory of it in their mouths. They remembered a particular kind of cigar, curly-capped, humble, the everyday smoke of home, and you couldn't buy it in Miami. So that is exactly what José made. He called them fumadas, and they weren't luxury objects. They were a taste of a country these men could never go back to. He would roll just enough, then go out at night, walking into shops, convincing owners to give this small, unknown brand a chance. That is where the empire begins, not with ambition, with homesickness, with a man giving other exiles a small piece of what they had lost, because he understood that loss better than anyone. But José knew that a cigar can only ever be as good as the leaf inside it, and Cuban tobacco was now behind a closed border. So he went looking, and what he found would change the entire map of the cigar world. In the highlands of Nicaragua, around a region called Estelí,
he discovered soil that seemed to remember Cuba. Black, volcanic earth, a microclimate, conditions strikingly close to Pinar del Rio, the very province his family had once farmed. It was as if the tobacco gods had hidden a second Cuba just a little further south and were waiting for someone who would recognize it. José recognized it. In 1967, he inspected the first shipment of Nicaraguan tobacco to reach the United States, and slowly, deliberately, he moved the heart of his production to Estelí. It was not an easy path. Nicaragua in those years was a country on the edge of revolution, and the family would face upheaval there too. Back in Miami, the danger was even more personal.
In the violent years of exile politics, the Padrón family endured bombing attempts and even kidnapping attempts. This was not a gentle rise to success. This was a family that had already lost one country, refusing to be frightened out of building a life in another. Through all of it, José held on to one obsession. Not fame, not wealth, quality. He wanted, in his own words, to make cigars that were 100% perfect. He would judge the quality of cured tobacco by pressing his face directly into the leaf and breathing it in, trusting his own senses over any machine. He refused to rush fermentation ever, no matter what it cost in time. He aged his tobacco for years when others aged it for months, and he never, to this day, revealed his blend. Some things, he understood, are worth keeping quiet. For decades, Padrón was a quiet success, a respected, honest, well-priced cigar that people who knew. But José was not finished. And in 1994, 30 years after that first storefront, he did something that would elevate his family from respected to legendary. He released the 1964 Anniversary Series. The name was a tribute to the year it all began, but the cigar itself made a statement. The tobacco was aged for 4 years, richer and stronger than almost anything else coming out of Nicaragua. And crucially, it wasn't round. It was box-pressed, squared off, pressed firmly into shape so that it felt different the moment you picked it up. Now, the Padrón family did not invent box pressing, but this was the cigar that made the whole industry pay attention to it. Before 1994, most cigars on the market were round. Afterward, box pressing became a signature of the premium world.
And that shift, that quiet reshaping of what a luxury cigar even looks like, traces back to this one release. The timing was almost poetic. A young magazine called Cigar Aficionado was just beginning to define taste for a whole generation of smokers, and the critics discovered these deep, powerful, beautifully made Nicaraguan cigars from a family almost nobody had heard of. The Padrón name began to rise. Then came the crown. In 2002, José released the Serie 1926, named for the year of his own birth, created to mark his 75th birthday. Box-pressed again, aged a minimum of 5 years. And in 2007, one cigar from that series, the 1926 No. 9, was named Cigar of the Year and earned a rating of 97 points, for a time the highest score that magazine had ever given a cigar made outside of Cuba. Think about what that means. A family stripped of everything, exiled from the island that defined fine tobacco, had just made a cigar that the world judged superior to almost anything the old country was producing. The soil of Estelí had answered the soil of Pinar del Rio, and it had answered in the name of a man who arrived in America with $60 and a borrowed hammer. But success brought a shadow, the way it always does. As Padrón became one of the most desired cigars on earth, it also became one of the most counterfeited. Fakes appeared everywhere, cheap imitations trading on a name the family had spent decades building in honesty. For most brands, that would be a problem to complain about. The Padróns turned it into a philosophy.
They introduced a serialized guarantee ban, a single unique number on every premium cigar, so that anyone, anywhere, could verify that what they held was truly theirs. They took the highest compliment a counterfeiter can pay, imitation, and turned it into a mark of trust. The very thing meant to cheat their customers became a seal that protected them. And here we arrive at the real secret of Padrón, the thing most smokers never quite put into words. Ask people why they love this cigar, and they'll talk about flavor, cocoa and coffee, leather and spice, that long, smooth finish. And all of that is true, but it isn't the answer.
The genius of Padrón was never a single perfect taste. The genius was consistency, the almost impossible discipline of making the same cigar at the same standard again and again and again for decades without slipping. Anyone can get lucky once. To never disappoint across millions of cigars and generations of time, that is the hardest thing in this entire craft, and it is exactly what a family that had already lost everything refused to gamble on. They controlled their own farms, their own fermentation, their own aging, their own rolling, their own distribution. No middleman, no shortcuts, no accelerated anything. Because when you have watched everything you built disappear once, you do not leave the second thing to chance. José Orlando Padrón passed away in December of 2017, but he did not leave behind an empty title. He left behind a standard. His son Jorge leads the company now, alongside his brother, carrying the discipline forward exactly as it was handed down. And they still tell the story of the little hammer, because for this family, it was never just a tool.